Have you seen Daniel? No, me neither. I haven't seen Daniel. I was speaking to Loz D a little while ago, a couple of weeks ago. I think it was on one of his lives. Shout out Loz. And that sort of discussion came up. Daniel Dubois, where is Daniel Dubois? And Loz is in the belief that there is some kind of duck going on. And I, at the time, said, no, I think genuinely Daniel Dubois was ill. There was something that kept him out of boxing, but I fully believed that they had jumped on the opportunity to skip the Joseph Parker fight and go into an Alexander Usyk fight next. And I must say, I have changed my opinion a bit since then. And it's because of the radio silence from Daniel Dubois. He hasn't been seen anywhere, as far as I know, since he should have been fighting Joseph Parker. Joseph Parker went on to fight Martin Bakole, and that is now history. But the lack of sort of access to Daniel Dubois, the lack of access being in any interviews, any boxing channels, as far as I know, I haven't seen Daniel Dubois on anything. I haven't heard anything. So if any of you have, and I'm wrong, then you can share it with me in the comments. But it does raise suspicions as to why the sort of abnormal absence of Daniel Dubois in the boxing world, in the boxing media world. He's just not been there. If you go back to the prior to the proposed Joseph Parker fight, and Daniel Dubois was in Brazil, which he mentioned, and if you go back to the sit down with Joshua and Dubois, hosted by Ade, I think Joshua made a comment that said, "I know what you were doing in Brazil," something like that. But there was a lot of rumours going around at the time that Daniel Dubois was in Brazil to escape testing while he was coming off a cycle or on a cycle of PEDs, whatever. Now, this is all hyperbole. This is all rumour. But the rumours sprouted from somewhere. Now, I don't know, and I haven't looked into Daniel Dubois' testing schedule, how much he was tested prior to that fight, in the lead up to that fight, and so on and so on. But some testing agencies are better than others. There are the PED sort of world now is so advanced that there are so many ways to administer it to escape tests. Certain substances you can use that can avoid tests. Certain ways you can cloak the use with certain other substances, and this, that, and the other. So it's a very complex arena, is the PED arena. But the fact that, and also one of the other things I've noticed is that in a lot of, on all of the major, what can we say, the sort of the professional media around boxing, the bigger channels, no one's really broaching the question. No one's even really answering the question of where is Daniel Dubois? Why haven't we heard anything from him? No one's really tackling that. The smaller channels are tackling that. As I said, Loz is challenging it. A lot of people have spoke about it. Now, myself and Joe Stein were of the opinion that everyone who's saying there was a duck, or no, that's wrong, because a duck, and so a lot of the opinion is Daniel Dubois, it's a duck. A lot of the opinion is Daniel Dubois has bottled it. He's bottled it again. Now, duck, I do, but not by Daniel Dubois, for the reasons that everyone says, he bottled it. Either it's, he's lost his bottle to fight Joseph Parker, so he's bottled it to avoid fighting Joseph Parker. I don't believe in that. I don't believe that's the case. But a duck is a different matter, because a duck can be instigated not by him, by his team, by his camp, by other people on the outside, people in the periphery of his camp and his team. They can orchestrate the duck rather than Daniel Dubois. They can orchestrate it for very many reasons. Maybe they didn't want to fight Joseph Parker, really, or maybe it wasn't really, we want to skip Joseph Parker, but what we really want to do is fast track into a fight with Alexander Usyk. And when I thought, my initial standing on this was, no, Daniel Dubois had probably been ill. I believe he's been ill, and this is what I said to Loz, I believe that he was ill, but they used the opportunity of that illness to completely leapfrog a Joseph Parker fight and jump straight into a fight with Joseph Parker. So the initial reason the Joseph Parker fight didn't happen was genuine, but that was jumped on and used as a fantastic opportunity to fast track Daniel Dubois into a direct fight with Alexander Usyk instead of going through the very high risk, mission of fighting Joseph Parker. Now, in the kind of the same way as, if you believe that sort of thing, I certainly think COVID was a genuine thing. We can talk about where it originated from and how it was introduced, but it was certainly used, I believe, as an exercise to test control and dominance by a government over its people and how willing people are to do things just because the government are telling you to do them. And this is the excuse. But anyway, I digress. But it's like that was a fantastic thing to happen. If the illness was genuine, which I believed it was, a certain amount of me still believes there was something there, but I believe the opportunity was used to, maybe not to use to not fight Joseph Parker directly, but the opportunity was used to now just go into an Alexander Usyk fight. The schedule now for the Joseph Parker fight is now gone. So then we're now going to look at Alexander Usyk, and this was a great aid. This was a great thing to happen because it aids us in doing that. Part of the reason of me thinks that why Daniel Dubois has not spoken to any media, as far as I can tell, is that because of how we talk about Daniel Dubois, and this is not being disparaging to Daniel Dubois or disrespectful or mocking in any way, not at all. But a lot of people have noticed, again, me, myself, Joe Stunner, a lot of people have talked about this. Daniel Dubois does strike you as a kind of guy who may be on some kind of autism spectrum or whatever. And that is absolutely, I'm not disparaging that at all, not disrespecting that at all. It's just an observation, and it's not meant in any kind of disrespectful way at all. But I do have to think, has Daniel Dubois not been in front of a camera because the people around him, Daniel Dubois doesn't think the way like a quote unquote normal person would. So he's very unpredictable in what he might say. Is he not trusted to speak to a media outlet at this point? And if that is the reason, then the reason you're not trusting him to speak is because you believe he might let out something that kind of shouldn't be let out. Now, there's also the possibility of, and I believe the Usyk fight is made. I believe Usyk said that he wants the next fight to be Daniel Dubois, and believes it will be Daniel Dubois. Now, I don't know when that'll be, but there's been a long time in this sport. We have a thing called silent bans, which I'm sure that a lot of you are aware of. I'm not going to go into it too much, but there are certain fighters that have had silent bans, of which it's not made public. They have been caught for something in the background, and it doesn't come out, it's not made public, and they serve their ban in quiet, away from sort of the public knowledge, the boxing fans' knowledge. And this happens, this is a thing, this is pretty common, believe it or not. You guys will know this. But what you got to remember is it doesn't do boxing or anyone involved in boxing, everyone that eats at the boxing table, that doesn't do any good to keep having high-profile fighters pop for performance-enhancing drugs. The more top-line fighters that pop for performance-enhancing drugs, the more sort of dark clouds are cast over the sport. The more fights are going to fall through, at least when they're scheduled. Plans are going to be shattered, and everyone dining at the boxing table is going to fucking lose money. And not only that, boxing looks worse and worse and worse and loses more and more credibility. And also, the testing looks less and less competent. The more, well, not competent because the fighters are being caught. So it's competent in a sense, but it suggests a certain amount of incompetence with the testing agencies because more and more fighters are seeing a plausible risk to do PEDs with some indication they think they may not get caught, and that does reflect badly on the testing agencies. But the more elite top-line fighters that pop, kind of the worse, because the elite top-line fighters, that's where the money is. And certainly if you look at Daniel Dubois, he is the new star of the heavyweight division in many ways. And is that good for boxing? Is that good for the ecosystem that Daniel Dubois is now found out to be a drug cheat? And I'm not saying he is. I'm just throwing some hypothesis out there on what may or may not have happened. And I'd love for you lot to let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think What's your take on what's going on? I do not believe that Daniel Dubois has a mortal fear of Joseph Parker, and he bottled it. I don't believe that. Do I believe? Is there a possibility that there is something going on behind the scenes that we don't know about, i.e., some kind of failed test, or has he been steered away from the Joseph Parker fight because plans and timescales are in place, and the Joseph Parker fight we didn't really need? It's a really odd one to believe that, though, because to ditch that fight on fight night, was it fight night or the day before? Was it on the day of weigh-in or the day of the fight? I can't remember. I think it was the day before, wasn't it? It was the day before because Martin Bacoli had kind of a day to get there. But it seems a little bit of a stretch to ditch a fight without a legitimate reason, i.e. him being ill at that point. But the longer and longer Daniel Dubois is not in the boxing universe, in a vocal sense, within the media, you do have to ask questions. You do really have to ask questions, because it is so strange that usually your IFLs, your Boxing King medias, your Seconds Out, your Talk Sports would have been talking to Daniel. He would have been on some of these channels. He would have been on some of these mediums, and he just isn't. And the fact that these same channels, these same mediums, the top tier of the kind of the commercial boxing channels, the IFLs, the Seconds Out, the Talk Sports, all of those guys, no one's really mentioning the fact that Daniel Dubois has not been seen or not been spoken to or has not come out and said anything. No one's questioning it. No one's even asking the question on these channels, where is Daniel Dubois? No one's even posing the question, as far as I've seen. It's the lower end channels, which are genuinely the more, how can I say it, the more authentic, the more virtuous channels, because the smaller the channels, they get to ask the uncomfortable questions, they get to talk about the uncomfortable topics, that the channels with access to all these fighters, all these promoters, all these managers, their hands are tied really in what they can say and what they can't say, and what they can ask and what they can't ask, for the fear of losing access, the fear of losing revenue. Because for a lot of those channels, you look at IFL. IFL, I used to watch a lot. IFL, I don't really watch anymore. But I only used to watch IFL for the people IFL was talking to. Not really for the subjects they were talking about, not really for the people hosting them shows asking the questions, but for the people they had access to. Those channels were a chance to hear from these fighters, these trainers, these managers, and everyone in the sport. Take that away, and those channels don't really have anything. And I'm one of the smallest channels out there, ultimately insignificant. But we don't and will never have to or never rely on getting access to fighters. Even G-Man, who is G-Man's, I think, pushing 30k subscribers. G-Man hasn't needed access to. He has had and does have access to fighters, trainers, press conferences and all that. But his channel doesn't rely on it. He doesn't need it. So he's free to, all right, he's doing work with DAZN and stuff like that. And LA, so there's a little bit now of, they have to be, I suppose, a touch politically correct to a degree, but not in the way that these other channels do. But it's just weird that Daniel Dubois has not been seen. He's not come out and said anything. And he's always done media before. He's always done press before. But why now? And with Daniel, I don't think it's Daniel's decision. I don't think Daniel has said, I'm not going to talk to him. I'm not talking to him. And I don't believe there's been no applications to Dubois or his team for an interview. I don't believe that at all. Like, whoever gets the first Daniel Dubois interview now, that's doing huge numbers. So it's not that channels don't want to talk to Daniel. They do, 100%, probably more than anyone at the moment. And he's not talking. And I can only assume and guess, and I'll put my money on that it's his people around him that don't want him to talk. And you have to ask the question, why don't you want Daniel to talk? Is there someone that's gone on? Is there someone that's being hidden? Is there some kind of silent ban? Is there some kind of agreement? Is there been a failed test? Has there been, people talk about conspiracy. And when people talk about conspiracy, it gives visions of this grandiose plan involving hundreds of people. Conspiracy can really just can tape up between two people, really. But conspiracy sounds like you've got your tin hat on and the Earth is flat. But no, we're talking about a lot lower level sort of conspiracy. But there's got to be something going on. Is there something going on? Does anyone know anything more than I don't? I haven't seen Daniel. I haven't heard of Daniel. Have you? Because if you haven't, you do have to ask the question why. Yeah, let me know.